I am a hand reader. I have developed a system for hand reading that is different from other systems being used by hand readers on the planet. I use fingerprint analysis in a way that nobody else does to look at life purpose and life lessons.
I'm a neurologist, although I'm not actively in practice anymore. I finished my practice in California at Stanford.
I'm an English transplant, as you can tell by the accent. I came here 25 years ago. My original training in England is in fashion and textile design. I spin, yarn and weave, and I make fabric.
Immediately before hand analysis, I was a book editor. And previously before that, I had been a full-time mother, and before that, a psychotherapist. Palmistry, which is father of hand analysis, is so old they don't know how old it is.
Aristotle wrote that this ancient art and science, handreading, has been around so long. Most of it is lost to antiquity and will never be recovered.
The best guesses are between 5,000 and 10,000 years ago, probably in India and China, is when people started looking at hands and paying attention to what they said.
In palmistry, individuals have just done stuff on their own, and it hasn't kind of like built upon each other. The pieces haven't been connected to each other. People must have studied hands, spent their whole life studying hands, figured all sorts of things out, and then died and took their knowledge with them, or left it behind, and maybe it lasted a generation.
Up until about 1600s, palmistry was taught at universities, in Europe even. It was considered part of what an educated person was supposed to know. And then I think it was the influence of the church started seeing it and identifying it more with witchcraft, fortune telling, that kind of thing, which is all in Judeo-Christian perspective a bad idea, to put it mildly. It took on this connotation of something outlawed. And the only people who were doing it were the gypsies, who were by definition outlaws. So it became very identified with them and with that outlaw culture.
As palmistry moved forward, you have a Frenchman in the early 1800s who is considered a demarcation point between ancient palmistry and modern palmistry. He kind of pulled together different systems and created a system where there were 7 hand types. The problem is that by the time I started looking at hands in 1969, nobody's hand seemed to match any of the 7 pictures that I was looking at. And so for a while I just figured it was a problem with me as a student. But I'm looking backwards now, most hands don't look like that anymore. I'll bet they did look like that 200 years ago when Darpigné was putting his system together, but hands don't look like that anymore.
And then around, I'd say, the late 1800s, people started looking at hands a little more scientifically. So there was some rudimentary kinds of hand analysis in the late 1800s, early 1900s. It was still, a lot of it was mixed up with palmistry. That was about the same time also that people started paying attention to fingerprints, which until then nobody had done. They started systematically using fingerprints as a way to identify people. I would say that the kind of hand analysis I use clearly started with Richard Unger in the late 70s and early 80s, and that's when he came up with the system of using the fingerprints as part of the hand analysis.
When I met Richard, I was working on a book that had started out in my mind as a sort of hand owner's manual.
He was writing this book about hands, and he wanted to find out about me. Somebody said he should see me, and he didn't really want to. I learned later, but he did it anyway.
Richard's a very smart guy, and he knew that I was coming as a skeptic.
We're talking about hands, or I'm talking to him about hands, and he says, okay, let me put you to the test. I'll bring you the handprints of 5 people I know, and you look at them.
And he very willingly said sure, and he showed me how you ink a hand and how you transfer that impression to a piece of paper, and he sent me on my way. So I came back with the prints, I put them down, turned on the tape recorder, and he started telling me who these people were.
And he knew these people really well, and he realized that I knew them well also from looking at their handprints, and I had no clue. He didn't say anything.
And he explained that it was really pretty straightforward, that there are things that you notice about the appearance of the hand, about the shape, about markings on the hand, and he told me there's a classical system that is widely used, but there was something a little different about his system, that he used fingerprints in a certain way, and that he had found over a period of some years doing this that there was an information in the fingerprints that was very useful. And he said, and this was impressive to me, he said, when I kept records, I sort of perked up when he said he kept records, because that sounds like a scientist. It hadn't occurred to me that there was anybody doing this kind of work who might actually be looking objectively and critically at their own data.
Apparently, I was the first person with a palmistry background who had read thousands of hands and all the literature in palmistry, to have visited the medical libraries and to have the benefit of doctors' research.
So I ended up taking a year-long course that he taught, and at the end of that, I got a certificate, and I became a certified hand. I don't know of any other neurologists who were certified hand owners. I was really ready for the kind of information that Richard's readings were providing. It just became, I just fell into that. I started using him as a consultant in my clinic at UCSF. I used him as a consultant, and I did readings with my patients at Stanford, and everybody just sort of left me alone because it turned out that it was useful.
I took Reiki, which is a Japanese healing technique, with a friend of mine, and she had Richard Unger come and do a hand reading party for her. So Richard read for me, and in 5 minutes I felt completely naked. And I said that whatever it took and however long it took, I needed to have that technique. I'd never seen anybody get that far into my psyche in a short period of time. It's basically advanced psychology, and it's also like so life-changing for the person that's actually going through it.